surely is a matter of public interest and therefore of interest to this House, but is not something that can be bruited abroad. So the ISC provides the very obvious solution to discovering what representations were made and what material was passed between our allies and the Cabinet Office before this appointment was made. Can he make that commitment?
Minister.
Well, I hope the House has seen, even in the course of this debate, Mr Speaker, how the constructive approach I've tried to take on the role of the ISC and its role in this process. That's precisely what I've done. I want to turn now to another issue of this matter, which is the peerage. Because another action the government is determined to take is to strip Peter Mandelson of his title, as the Prime Minister has set out. And frankly, I think people watching this will be bemused, because there is no other walk of life where you are unsackable unless a law is passed. So we will introduce primary legislation. The government has written to the chair of the Lords Conduct Committee to ask the Lords to consider what changes are required to modernise the House processes to remove Lords quickly when they brought either House into disrepute. And the government stands ready to support the House in whatever way it is necessary to put any changes in effect. Now, Mr Speaker, being in office is a privilege. It is a privilege. Every day is a privilege, and that is why there is anger across this House about Peter Mandelson and his actions. The test for the government in these circumstances is the action we take to respond. And as I think has also come through this debate, our utmost thoughts are with the victims, the women and girls who suffered at the hands of Jeffrey Epstein. Behind the emails, the photographs and the documents are many victims who are exposed to this network of abuse. They should be our priority in this matter, and I'm sure they will be for the rest of this debate. Thank you.
The original question was as on the order paper, since when the amendment has been proposed as on the order paper. The question is that the amendment be made. Lisa Smart, Liberal.
Thank you very much indeed, Mr Speaker. We are having this debate today solely because of the women and girls who found the courage to come forward about the abuse they had endured over years at the hands of rich and powerful men. Without these women's bravery in speaking up about their experiences at the hands of a paedophile sex trafficker and his friends, none of these shocking revelations would have come out. We owe these women justice, and we owe it to them to make changes to create a system that works. I will.
I thank the honourable member for giving way. Victims, she is right, should be at the heart of this process. The allegations against someone the Prime Minister and Ministers put full trust in is absolutely shocking. Jeffrey Epstein was a sick child predator and a sex offender. He visited Hillsborough Castle on at least one occasion. Does she agree that this House and the Government should have a full review of his activities whilst there and an audit of visitors to him during this time? The victims deserve answers.
So I agree with the Honourable Lady's characterisation of some of the individuals we're talking about today. I think we will be supporting the Leader of the Opposition's motion to request the amount of information that is sought, and we would go further. We would look to a public inquiry to look at the detail that I think the victims deserve. The revelations about Peter Mandelson's conduct raise profoundly serious questions about judgment, about national security and about accountability. The leaked emails suggest that while serving as a Cabinet Minister, he shared sensitive government information, sharing details about the 2008 financial crisis, market-sensitive bailout measures and potential asset sales. These allegations point to potential misconduct in public office aimed at helping those involved enrich themselves. They certainly warrant the police investigation that was announced yesterday, but also reveal catastrophic failures in the systems meant to protect our national interest. The emails highlight a fundamental lack of accountability that exists within our current system. The Prime Minister has rightly called Peter Mandelson's conduct a betrayal. He submitted material to the police, requested draft legislation on removing peerages. These responses are necessary, but it has taken the government far too long to get to this position. Mandelson was appointed ambassador to the United States by this government and this Prime Minister, even after his links to Epstein had been extensively reported by the Financial Times and Channel 4 News. I will give way to my honourable friend.
I thank my honourable friend for giving way. The Cabinet Secretary, in evidence to the Foreign Affairs Committee after Mandelson had been withdrawn from Washington, said that a summary of the developed vetting and conflict of interest report was given to the Prime Minister prior to Mandelson's appointment, something which the Prime Minister appeared to confirm at the dispatch box earlier. The government and the Prime Minister has repeatedly said that it was the extent of the relationship that changed and somehow altered the appropriateness of his appointment. I wonder what message she thinks it sends to the victims of Jeffrey Epstein, to the many victims of rape, of paedophilia, of sexual assault, of sex trafficking, that anyone with a relationship with Jeffrey Epstein should be deemed appropriate to be our representative in Washington.
I completely, Mr. Speaker, I completely agree with my honourable friend. I am not sure what extent of friendship is appropriate with a known convicted sex trafficker to put somebody in our most senior diplomatic position. I will in a minute. I'll make a tiny bit more progress if I may. Channel 4 Dispatches in 2019 interviewed a witness who saw Epstein take a phone call from Mandelson while he was in prison for child sex trafficking. Mandelson asked for a favour to meet the then JP Morgan CEO. All of this information was in the public domain.
I'm grateful that she's made the exact point about it being in the public domain, often from the US. And one of the questions we haven't heard from the government was a request put in to the US to ask whether there are any concerns in the first place, because we know that this relationship was public. We know that it existed. So did the US get asked for any information or any concerns they have? I haven't heard the government explain this point. Has she?
I've been listening as intently as the honourable gentleman has, I'm sure. I think there are so many questions that are right for the government to answer. We believe a public inquiry is the way to get to the bottom of that after any police investigation has concluded. There are questions that swirl around which advisers said what and when. But the decision to hire Mandelson was ultimately the Prime Minister's, and he must be held responsible for that choice.
On that point, will she give way?
Happily.
I thank you for giving way. Earlier, the Minister said that Jeffrey Epstein's crimes were unforgivable. Does she think that the Prime Minister appointing said known paedophile, was that forgivable? Is that forgivable?
I think my honourable friend is referring to the friend of a known paedophile rather than the appointment of a paedophile.
Thank you very much.
Which is an important clarification to make. I think that there are rightly questions surrounding the judgment displayed by the Prime Minister in appointing Peter Mandelson to the position of UK Ambassador to the US. And the questions around that judgment, Mr. Speaker, are wholly valid, as are questions being asked around current Cabinet Ministers who also chose to maintain friendships with Mandelson, with rumours of him popping in and out of some offices at will. And I must say I noted the facial expressions of some on the government front bench during PMQs earlier today. Many questions were raised about Mandelson before his appointment, of course. There were questions raised about him during the 2009 expenses scandal. He was forced to resign from Cabinet twice for unethical behaviour, and we understand the security services raised serious concerns about his appointment last year. Yet he was still appointed to one of our most sensitive diplomatic positions. This is not a case of one unforeseen problem. This is a pattern of warning signs that were ignored. This Labour government promised to break with Conservative chaos, and instead we see the same failures, inadequate checks, reactive crisis management, and an inability, I will in a moment, and an inability to prevent obvious problems. You do not restore public trust with heartfelt apologies after things go wrong. You do it by having proper systems that stop scandals before they happen. Labour has failed to maintain public confidence, and they must do better. I will give it.
I thank honourable for giving way. Obviously, people here want to get to the bottom of accountability in terms of the Prime Minister, other elements within number 10, and of course what Peter Mandelson himself has done. But there is something out there, I think, which is more systemic, and the public understand that this isn't just about a number of rotten apples in the system. It is systemic. It is about wealth and power and access and how they treat young girls and women and us, the public. They take us for mugs. So does she believe that this is wider than just a few bad apples? It is systemic, and that's what needs to be addressed here, and that's what the public wants.
It's just
So
smart.
I wholeheartedly agree with the honourable gentleman. I'm wondering, Mr Speaker, if he's seen ahead in my notes for my remarks about some of the systemic changes we as Liberal Democrats would like to see. I agree with him. This goes far beyond a few bad apples. There are systemic failures in our country that we need to seize this opportunity to address. There are fundamental weaknesses in our system of government, weaknesses that successive administrations have failed to address and which now further threaten public confidence. I'm going to take the urging of the Father of the House to focus on how we make progress from here. We must make reforms to the ministerial code, as it is clearly not functioning as it is. The code exists as a set of rules and principles, acting as guidance for ministers rather than having legal basis. Therefore, ministers who breach it face no legal consequences. When the ministerial code is investigated, even when this is done by independent advisers, the Prime Minister can decide whether to listen to the adviser or not, which means that accountability becomes almost meaningless. And I wonder if, in his winding up remarks, the Minister might consider this and using this troubling episode in our national story as a catalyst for bringing about the much-needed change by enshrining the ministerial code in law. Liberal Democrats believe that to go some way to restore vital public trust in our democracy, we also need to make fundamental reforms to this House and the other place. Members of the government clearly share this sentiment, as we've heard various ministers on the airwaves over the last couple of days saying that the government recognises the urgency of reforming the laws and may bring forward proposals at pace. I'd be grateful if the Minister could lay out further detail of their plans to legislate, especially given growing concern about public trust in our democratic institutions and the integrity of this Parliament. The government holds a substantial majority in this House, and we've seen that they're able to push through legislation rapidly. We saw this only last week with the Medical Training Prioritisation Bill, and the same process could be used to make urgent changes to the other place. Ministers need to set out the legal mechanisms available to suspend or remove a peer, the timetable for any planned legislation, the progress of cross-party discussions that have been mentioned in the press, and how confidence in the upper chamber will be restored. Because without clarification, uncertainty risks further eroding public confidence in Parliament and in our democratic institutions. To the specifics of the motion we're discussing today and the government amendment to it. We Liberal Democrats believe firmly that transparency is vital, and it is the very least the government can do to release the information requested, so we will be supporting the main motion. We would go further. We don't even know the full extent of the British establishment's involvement in Epstein's appalling crimes, or how many British girls and young women were trafficked by him. We are calling for a full public inquiry with the power to compel witnesses, both to get justice for the victims and to protect our national security.
On that point,
I will give way.
I thank my honourable friend for giving way, and specifically on the information that's available. Does she share my discomfort with the fact that this information has only become clear for us, but this mass release of information from the Department of Justice in the United States? And whilst I understand the government's reluctance to release information that may well harm international affairs, that doesn't seem to be a concern of the US government.
I'm grateful to my honourable friend, and I think the best disinfectant is often daylight. I am strongly in favour of transparency and welcome it, including the information that's being requested today.
For giving way. I think her point about the wider establishment is important. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Individuals like Sir Richard Branson, who are clearly offering to help Epstein to launder his identity and his reputation by suggesting PR advice on how he might recover from his prosecution. And gentlemen like Bill Gates, whose wife has very bravely spoken out against one of the reasons why she left him due to his links to Epstein. How do we make sure that men like this, who continue to have extreme power, can face some sort of justice on this?
It's just smart.
She's entirely right to talk about some of the very well-known men, and it is men, wealthy, powerful, greedy men who we are talking about today, who should be held accountable for their actions. The transparency that is sought today is something I think we should all welcome and have in our minds the victims and survivors, and preventing future young girls and women from being victims and survivors of similar crimes. We should do all we can and take that responsibility that we have very seriously indeed. My right honourable friend, the member for Kingston and Surbiton, mentioned earlier in questions to the Prime Minister, and indeed the Shadow Minister mentioned from the dispatch box today, that the Polish government thinks Epstein may have been spying for Putin. The British public and Epstein's victims deserve to know if a UK cabinet minister was leaking secrets not only to a convicted paedophile and sex trafficker, but also a Russian agent. We Liberal Democrats recognise the vital importance of safeguarding national security and genuinely welcome the openness displayed by the Minister in looking at the ISC as a way of getting to the bottom of some of this that he expressed earlier. However, safeguards are already in place to protect national security. These include the National Security Act, which restricts the disclosure of information where this would harm the safety or interests of the UK. And in tabling the amendment they have, including international relations, as a reason to keep secret the information they have, the government is trying to wriggle out of their obligation to the truth, and we will not support it. Willingly.
The Honourable Lady for giving way. I think the transparency point is really important. Peter Mandelson was a Labour politician. This is a Labour government. It may be that Peter Mandelson was an isolated bad apple and really no one knew anything about anything that he was doing until this release of these documents last week. But the public will wonder and they will question, and if a Labour government covers up by being anything less than fully transparent, they will wonder who they're covering up for and why.
Lisa Smart.
I think there have been a series of administrations who have not been as open as they might be, who've made poor choices about the behaviour of some of their members that have ended up in scandal and disgrace. And I completely agree if she's making a point that public trust in our institutions, public trust in our government is vital, and we must all take that very seriously. There is a sorry legacy of recent governments who have behaved less than impeccably in a number of ways. And I think using this whole sorry episode as a catalyst to bring about much needed change is something we would strongly support.
Would you give way? Would you give way?
I will give way and then I will.
For Andrew Millis.
Giving way. Now, the Prime Minister has said it's okay because the Cabinet Secretary is going to command this process. Does she agree with me that the Cabinet Secretary is a person of impeccable repute, but whatever he is, he can't be objective because he's been involved in this process. Absolutely. It is almost unfair to put this on him. So what mechanism can she devise that will deal with that, other than give the great bulk of this, because international relations is going to cover the great bulk of this, to the ISC?
Well, he's clearly been reading Liberal Democrat press releases, Mr Speaker, because we believe a public inquiry is a far more effective way of getting to the bottom of this, and I'm delighted that he made that point. I said I'd go to the back and then I'll...
Corbyn. I thank the member for giving way, and she's making some excellent points. Would she agree with me that all of the inquiry systems that have been discussed so far in this debate are actually influenced or participants in of people who've been within the golden circle of Peter Mandelson in the past? Don't we need something very novel and very different, such as an independent judge-led inquiry or judicially-led inquiry that examines the whole thing in the round in the way that perhaps the Chilcot inquiry looked into the Iraq War? Lisa Smart.
I'm always delighted to get agreement from across the political spectrum, Mr Speaker, and I very much agree with the right honourable gentleman that an independent judge-led inquiry would be the right way to go.